welcome back to the OT Unleashed Student Takeover Series. I'm Katie Peterson, and today I'm super excited as we're having a little bit of discussion with a fellow Rehab Arcade capstone student, Laura. And before we get started, I'm just going to hand it over to Erik for a second to kind of introduce Laura and get her conversation rolling.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're we're super excited. It's really cool to be able to put these two capstones in the same place together. And Laura and I have been working together now since January on her project, which is tabletop role playing games as a therapeutic medium. And one of the things that I want to encourage you with is that as you're thinking about this, as you're listening to the podcast, thinking about your projects, really, you could really do what your passion is. And the thing that I love most about this particular capstone is that Laura has always been a tabletop role-playing gamer. And she loves it, and it's her passion, on top of, being an OT and all those things as well. So, anytime I talk about research, a lot of times I talk to people about, like, make sure you're doing something that you love. Make sure it's something that really resonates with you. And Laura actually was in my session at AOTA last year when I was talking about the Rehab Arcade, kind of introducing it to the world a bit. And she approached me as saying, "Hey, I've got this idea. I don't know if it fits, but maybe we can make it work." And I think right away we were like, let's make it work. Let's figure it out. And so it was a really cool opportunity to bring something that, though I know tabletop role-playing games, I'm not an expert, and she's an expert. And this is why I love the Rehab Arcade itself, is because we bring in these expert people who are passionate, and it's stuff that resonates with individuals, and bring them to the table to give, their kind of take on their passion. So, so everybody, this is Laura Wiess. She's a occupational therapy student who will be finishing up here this month. And she will also be at AOTA this year. And so if you want to meet her, I would absolutely love to make an introduction. She'll be at my session at conference, and we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that. But Laura, before we jump into all of these things, and we have so many questions for you, and we want to kind of just get in your head and see why you went this direction and how and what you did. Actually, I guess we got to talk about the capstone. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wanted to become an OT and kind of what brought you this direction.
Yeah, hi. So I had a sort of interesting path to getting towards occupational therapy. I was actually in medical school, and my
Wow.
plan was to become a pediatric physical medicine and rehabilitation doctor. And so sort of along that path, I spent a lot of time in the rehab units and the specialty outpatient clinics at the Children's Hospital, shadowing the physicians. And I noticed that it felt like a lot of what they were doing was handling pain and medication management with kids who they saw a few times a year. And then when those physicians would go do their paperwork, they'd basically be like, you don't have to sit here and stare at me on a computer. Go spend
Yeah.
more time in the rooms, go shadow the therapists. And so I'd go back in the rooms with the occupational therapists, and I saw that they were on the ground with the kids. They were working towards sort of everyday tasks and everyday goals. And over time, I started to realize that that's really more what I was looking for in my own career, and that it played a little more to my strengths and like how my brain
Yeah.
works.
I love that. I love that. And it makes a lot of sense. I think that we hear a lot of stories similar to that where, maybe they were interested in a different profession and they're like, wow, actually kind of my heart is really where an OT would be. Did you consider any of the other health professions at the time, or were you like, I think OT is where I need to be?
Um, so I was spending time shadowing OT, PT, and speech,
Yeah,
because those were the three specialists that were
sure.
seeing the kids while the physicians did their paperwork. And OT really just stood out the most to me. It was the one where I saw the most like the that like therapeutic use of self. I
Yeah,
saw the kids light up the most when the OTs came in the room. I saw the most sort of, even in that short sessions that I was watching, it felt like they were having that most like hands-on connection.
Yeah, cool.
That's super awesome. That's an amazing journey to get to occupational therapy and seeing how meaningful of an impact that we can have, especially on those children's lives that you were getting to experience with them. It's super cool. Can you kind of talk to us too about, how you started seeing how you could connect your love for tabletop role-playing games and how you could use that as maybe a meaningful occupation in this field?
Yeah, so the thought of using tabletop games in therapy predates my thoughts of going into occupational therapy. So it was really throughout medical school, early on, I was getting really into playing these types of games, and I was just sort of thinking about how there's just so much to them, and I think that they could really be used in these sort of therapeutic spaces. And that sort of sat on the back burner in my mind for a very long time. And then when I went to Erik, when I went to your talk, and you were talking about the therapeutic use of like video games as a meaningful occupation, that's really what got those gears turning for me. And then during my second level 2 field work last year, I was working with a teenager. And as we were working, we started talking about how we both love Dungeons and Dragons specifically. And he sort of jokingly suggested that we should play it during our session. And after that session ended, I spoke with my educator who sort of gave me the go ahead to try to figure something out. And really, like, the rest was history, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool, and I love that you kind of continued this like thought that it's possible, and I love that it was almost a patient. It was a patient that was like, "Hey, you should do this. We should do this." What a cool way to like find yourself in a space that you're completing your professional doctoral work in it. So. That said, like, what is your capstone? What is it? What did you do? What did you build? And then we want to kind of tear that down a little bit as we go.
Yeah, so I'm a student at the University of Pittsburgh, and the way our capstone works, I think, is different than other programs. I don't really know. I know that we have sort of two big parts to it. One is our group project, which is an experience that is based on some like preferences that we provide, but then we're sort of assigned to a location. And then we have our individual project, which is left more open to really our own decision, what we want to do with it. And so this has been a portion of my individual project for school. And so working with you, Erik, I have built out a portion of the Rehab Arcade website to include tabletop gaming. And so there's a whole page that goes into details about what tabletop games are and how to use them therapeutically. And then we have the TTRPG generator, which a therapist could use to get to a module or like a single session that they can print out and run with a patient. And so at that session with that patient, you would be playing a tabletop role-playing game, but as you're playing it, the patient is engaging in all these different therapeutic tasks.
Yeah. I honestly like it's been really cool to see. And I love that we got to the point where you're able to build this. It's been really, really neat. And I can't wait to share some of that with our listeners.
That's so cool, Laura. I really like how you got to kind of make a generator specifically for your capstone. We've talked previously about the game generator and how you can use that in therapy. But how do your tabletop role-playing games kind of align with that occupational therapy principles? Like, what kind of skills do they work on? And maybe what type of populations are you kind of thinking that these games can be integrated into?
Yeah, so occupational therapy is all about meaningful occupations. And these tabletop role-playing games or TTRPGs have the potential to get at that from sort of both sides. So firstly, for a lot of people, myself including, these games are a meaningful occupation to a lot of people. And they are only getting more popular over time. But then also the ability to bring something like the role-playing element into the therapeutic space allows us to take the tasks we're already doing and make them feel more meaningful to the patient. And so when I think of what population it would be best served for, my immediate thought is sort of the like teen, young adult age range, just because I think that is where a lot of the people who are playing TTRPGs are. But there are definitely lots of people outside of that age range, outside of that population, who love these kind of games or who could love them if they tried them. And so I really do think the possibilities are sort of endless.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy because like, as we were going through this process, I remember kind of thinking about like, how does this work? What are going to be, what if I was a therapist who didn't know a whole lot about TTRPGs? Because one of the things that we talk about in the rehab arcade in general with the therapeutic gaming side of it is that we want to create a space for the therapist who doesn't know anything about these things to feel comfortable with these things, right? So walk me through. I'm a brand new therapist. I don't know anything about TTRPG. Could I get on here and feel like what have you built to make sure that there's a safety net for me?
Yeah, so that's really where the whole module system comes into place. So I keep saying module. By that, I mean these sort of, in the game world, we call them one shots, but these sort of one session long stories that you can play through with the patient. And so when you go onto that game generator, the TTRPG generator, and you put in the details about the type of patient you're working with, so the setting you're in, if it's an individual patient or maybe a group, and then also what the overall sort of category is of the care that the patient is receiving. So things like fine motor skills or gross motor skills. It will produce for you a couple of pre-written modules. And so when you click on that, it'll take you to a page where you can see the entire module printed out, and it's written like a script. So
Yeah.
if you're someone who plays TTRPGs and you love them and you know what you're doing and you want to get creative, you can go off script as much as you want. But if you're new to this and you aren't as excited about the sort of on the spot role playing aspect of it, you can read the script and use
Yeah.
it as such.
Yeah. And actually I want to give an example of this because I've read through your scripts and they're gorgeous. I'm like almost emotional about it. I might actually cry as I'm reading the script, but for you that are listening out there, so I went through the TTRPG generator and I decided that I was going to do inpatient rehab setting. Actually, I think an inpatient setting working on mental health, and we did a group session. And this is how you would start the campaign. The roar of wind fills your ears as your airship dips through thick, swirling clouds. The wooden deck shudders beneath your feet. Cold rain stings your face, and flashes of lightning briefly light up the massive city below. Iron Reach stretches across a jagged mountain valley, towering stone walls, spinning windmills, floating bridges, and glowing arcane cables crisscrossing between buildings. Huge metal gears slowly grind along the sides of towers, powering the city's machinery. But something is wrong. Dark storm clouds churn directly above the tallest spire in the city, spiraling like a massive vortex. Thunder booms so loudly it rattles your bones. Warning. Warning bells echo through the streets as people run for cover, pulling children inside, slamming shutters closed, and shouting to one another through the rain. As your airship touches down, the entire city seems to tremble beneath your feet. Whatever is happening here, it's bad. And then you enter the campaign. Like it's such a beautiful way to like start. And what I read for 2 minutes, and so if we're thinking about treatment sessions, like one of the things that you were very intentional with was like, hey, let's make sure I can get through a treatment session through this campaign or through this module or one shot. So tell me about like as you were looking and we had a discussion a little bit about this. What did you see the therapy sessions look like and kind of go into like the individual versus a group? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So basically I wrote it with 1 hour sessions in mind. But knowing that that is not the case in every clinical setting, I wanted it to be adjustable. And so whether or not you're doing a group one or an individual one, it's split up into scenes, and each scene has the same basic structure, which is that there's a descriptive background, and then the participant, whether it's one patient or a group, are doing some sort of therapeutic activity. And then at the end, they're rolling some dice to see what else happens based on their performance on the therapeutic activity.
Yeah.
And there's some variation in that. Some of them, the dice might be in the middle of the activity, especially if it seemed like having that sort of cognitive challenge of having to switch focus would be helpful to what the activity was trying to
Sure.
accomplish. But that's sort of the basic structure. And then the big
Yeah.
thing that changes when you go to the group ones is that the activities rely on more than one person. And they sort of also focus on that group building, social interaction aspect of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the psychosocial connection with the group ones. Like you can, like, not only are you going to be working on certain things that you're intentional with, whether it's physical disabilities or cognition or whatever, like you're bringing a network of people together to accomplish something, which goes straight to mental health, right? So like this is like such a it's a really cool thing. Now, you also built some of these with items that are available in a clinic. Tell me how you structured this so that it would be something that nobody would have to like go to a store or buy something like that stuff that they could pretty much find in their clinic.
So I wanted, yeah, as you said, I wanted to make sure that these were common items that most OTs probably have on hand or could be substituted for other items. So if I said to use coins to mark something, you could use rocks or something instead. I don't know, something
Yeah.
else you have laying around. The big sort of starting point of this was that TTRPGs generally are dice rolling systems. So you're rolling dice to look into you're rolling dice for like the likelihood that an event is going to happen. And sort of the most known TTRPG out there is Dungeons and Dragons, which uses a 7 set of dice of all different sizes, ranging from a 4-sided all the way up to a 20-sided. And while I have many dice laying around, not a thing that I would assume most therapists have. And while it's true you can find online dice rolling websites that will roll the
Yeah.
dice for you, I wanted that to be an easy tactile thing that you could include. And so part of how I built the system was that I built it as what is called a 2d6 system. So you use 2 6-sided dice. And those are the dice that you have in pretty much any board game. And so my thought process there was that, yeah, the therapy might not have a 20-sided die available, but like probably they have some old board games, whether or not in the clinic or that the therapist could bring in from home to find 2 6-sided dice.
Yeah.
And again, if they don't, they can use an online roller.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then for the other items, I sort of just thought about what seemed like something a normal therapy office would probably have access to. And when they're required for a module, I had that listed up at the front so that the therapist would see it before they started, would be able to get it ready, or know from the start that they aren't able to run this right now because they don't have that item available.
Yeah.
That's super awesome that you kind of laid it out like, all right, these are the things that you're going to need. And you really thought about that accessibility aspect, knowing that many clinics might not have, all this stuff readily available. So I think it's great that you really looked at it from that big, OT lens kind of aspect of it, trying to make sure that, whoever wants to implement this in their session is able to, regardless of what kind of materials that you're asking them to maybe provide in that session. That's super, super cool. So, have you gotten any feedback yet? Have you been able to see how like your tabletop role-playing games have been able to be implemented in the sessions yet? Or what is your experience on how you have tested and implemented your ideas with real-world participants?
Yeah, Yeah, so it just went live a couple of weeks ago. So we haven't had much opportunity to have people actually use the system, but we did send out a survey last week that asked people to look through the system, look through the website, and give some feedback. And so far, we have had like strongly positive responses, which is great. We have over 70 responses the last time I checked, which
That's
is
awesome.
awesome. I did not expect
Yeah.
that many, so very happy.
Yeah.
Um, we surveyed both clinicians and students who are training to be clinicians, and almost 60% said that they would consider using these resources in the future. And then 75% of the non-professionals surveyed said that they would be interested in a TTRPG-based therapy if they
Oh,
require therapy in the future, which was great. So
that's crazy. That's so telling because it's like, oh, yeah, like a lot of therapists like, maybe I would use it, but like you hear 3 out of 4 patients would want it, so it's like, remember, OT is not about what you want, it's about what they want. So like, what a cool, interesting response to, hey, look, I don't necessarily, I'm not a therapist, I'm not anybody, but if I was in the hospital and somebody used this with me, I would love it. Like that's a really cool.
yeah, we
Yeah.
actually had one response. I did leave in the survey places where people could type things. And basically, when you start filling out the survey, it asks what your role is. And so if you answer any of the healthcare professions, it takes you down one path. And if you answer not in healthcare, it takes you down sort of the patient path. And I had one person who filled out the entire survey as a healthcare professional. Um, and they said that while it doesn't feel like it applies to their specific field, if they were a patient, they would love it, as like the comment they left in the end.
That's
And
awesome.
fun to see.
That
No
is so amazing.
surprise. Yeah. And what's cool is like, if you're listening and you don't use games therapeutically, that's fine. Like the whole point of what we're doing here at the Rehab Arcade, the stuff that Katie's doing, the stuff that Laura's doing, the stuff that other students are doing, is that it's an additional piece that you can add to your toolkit. Like we don't all only do one thing. We do a lot of different things. And so to have it at your disposal is like a huge deal, and I want to, encourage you guys, like don't necessarily rule it out. Like we are, legitimately giving you something extra that might be just the perfect thing for your clients, so that's awesome.
Yeah, that's definitely a very good point. And, as occupational therapists, we want to be able to engage our clients in anything that is meaningful to them. And by you creating the TTRPG generator, it allows occupational therapists and other therapists to be able to use that in therapy and engage our clients in something that is meaningful to them. So I think it's super awesome that you kind of saw that gap and you created this. It's amazing. So I'm just going to leave you with a couple more questions about like, what do you see? How do you see this growing in the future? How do you see, you know, therapists responding to this as it continues to get more, views and people engaging with it on the Rehab Arcade?
Yeah, so my hope is that it continues to grow both in people using it and seeing it, and then also in the, few month span of my project, I was able to write a certain amount of modules. But I would love to be able to expand that, whether that's me writing more or other therapists contributing their own modules. I think that would be great. Um, and also, one thing that we've spoken about is potentially in the future having a version of this that could be purchased so that a therapy office could have it, everything already printed out, the papers already laminated, and things like that. And so it would still be available online for free, but be like a physical, tangible thing that
Yeah.
a therapist could own if they wanted to.
Make the dice with the little Rehab Arcade logo on it or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
That's
That's
so
cool.
cool. Well, Laura, can you just leave our listeners with any final thoughts on using tabletop role-playing games in for therapy or, anybody that's listening, giving them the last couple words of advice on your experience?
Yeah, so I was actually recently at a gaming convention, and I was able to attend a lot of talks on accessible gaming. And one of the people that I spoke to and that I heard speak, Dr. Elizabeth McLean, said at one point that everyone is a storyteller, but not everyone is getting a chance to tell their story. And she was talking specifically about accessibility in the gaming space, but I think that it can be applied also to what we are doing here. And so through tools like the Rehab Arcade TTRPG system, we're making therapy more approachable, engaging, and simply just more fun. We're aiming to increase the patient's motivation so that we can help them reach their goals and be able to do those things that they need to do, want to do, and are expected to do. So sort of that's what I'm hoping for this in the future is to be able to continue doing this with it.
Yeah. Well, Laura, and I'm going to kick it over to you, Katie, here in a second to close this out. But Laura, I wanted to just say before is that it's been such a joy to have you as a student. And I am so impressed by the work that you've done personally. And I just also honored to have your content as a part of the Rehab Arcades ecosystem. And so I love being able to brag on the students that have worked with me. And I certainly am, you're going to absolutely be one of those. I've shown it to so many people that are just so like, whoa. I mean, full one shots here. Like, I don't even have to think. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty impressive. So, so amazing work. So proud of you. Thankful for you. And for you, that you guys that are listening, please go check it out. Go to therehabarcade.com. If you look under therapeutic gaming, you'll see the TTRPG, subtitle, pop it on there, and you'll see she walks you through everything, even like character sheets, like how to play the game, like everything is there. You won't even have to think. It's just there, and it's easy. So make sure you hit that up, and we'd love your feedback. We have put the survey out in a bunch of different spaces, so be looking out for those as well. So awesome job, Laura.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again so much, Laura, for coming and sharing your experience and giving the listeners a little bit of insight on how to use TTRPGs during therapy or, just, helping a therapist be able to interact with their client more efficiently. It's been awesome hearing about your experience and your amazing work. So I really appreciate you coming and chatting with us today.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks again for everyone to coming and listening to our podcast series. We're nearing toward the end, and we have been really appreciating all the feedback and engagement with our series so far. So thank you both for coming and chatting and having this great conversation today, and we will see you next time.
Bye.